everybody. I'm Brittany Lewis, a breaking news reporter here at Forbes. Joining me once again is Congressman Pat Harrigan, a member of the For Country Caucus. Congressman, thank you so much for joining me.
Hey, Brittany, always great to be with you. Thanks for having me.
The longest government shutdown in American history seems to be coming to a close. Senate Republicans, with the help of a handful of Democrats who crossed the aisle, voted on a bill that would fund the government through January. And now the House is expected to vote on this pretty imminently. So to start off the conversation, what do you make of the government shutdown seemingly winding down?
Well, I think it's great, and it hasn't happened a moment too soon, right? We know that the only people and the only real assured thing that happens during a government shutdown is that the American people lose. We spend a lot of time finger pointing at one another. Certainly, we absolutely believe Democrats are responsible for this reckless shutdown, but nonetheless, watching the American people lose over the last 43 days has been very tough, and I'm glad that we are moving expeditiously to get the government back open again.
Congressman, I feel really lucky that I've talked to multiple members of the For Country Caucus, which is a bipartisan group of lawmakers in the House who are also veterans. And it seems like, based on my conversations with you all seem measured, you all seem willing to listen and have conversations across the aisle. I'm curious, since the government shut down for the past over 40 days, what have those conversations looked like, especially with Democrats, perhaps even in the For Country Caucus?
Behind the scenes, there's just a lot of frustration, right? I think everybody understands this isn't good for the country, and that's what people in the For Country Caucus actually care about. It's a group of people that have committed to putting country over party. And so we get very, very frustrated when things like this happen, and we can kind of commiserate about it together and try to work towards some solutions. But this is really one of those circumstances where the solution was the solution that was on the table from the very beginning. I mean, House Republicans voted on September 19th for a clean continuing resolution. That is something that House Republicans, while in the minority, voted for 12 separate times when President Joe Biden was in office, out of respect to him and his party, because elections do have consequences. We expected that same respect to be reciprocated to us this time around. And unfortunately, for whatever reason, the Democrats decided not to do that. And so from day one, we've talked about a clean continuing resolution being the solution to this problem. And guess what? 43 days later, a clean continuing resolution is the solution to the problem today. It's just frustrating, despite all of the politics, right? It is frustrating that we had to go through this last 43 days to get exactly where we started. Unfortunately, our Democratic colleagues have left a lot of destruction in their wake with the American people. I hope we don't do this again next year after this current continuing resolution expires on January 30th. I hope that cooler heads can prevail and we can do the right thing for America.
And when I've talked to Democrats in the House, they have said the reason why we are standing so firm here is because those healthcare premium costs will skyrocket if something's not done to address them. Republicans I've talked to say, hey, we think healthcare costs is a fight that we need to fight as well. That's a problem in this country. We'll deal with that, though, after the government's open. Are you one of those Republicans that say, hey, once the government's open, we need to have those conversations?
There's no question about it. Healthcare is unaffordable for 75% of Americans. I mean, I don't even take the House healthcare package because it's too dang expensive. It's like $2,200 a month for the family, right? Like, I've got better options than that out in the private sector that I can take advantage of. But there's so many Americans that are in that position or are in a similar position but don't have any other options. And so I'm very sympathetic to that. The cost of living, particularly the cost of healthcare, is way too high. But to stand behind this issue and say that we're shutting the government down over this issue is absolutely nonsensical, because we can have these policy debates and actually work together to solve the healthcare problems that we have over the next year. But we can do that while the government's open without laying waste to 1.5 million Americans and the second and third order consequences that come with a government shutdown to all Americans. I think that was highly irresponsible by the Democratic Party. And I think it's disingenuous to say that you're fighting for health care while denying pay, denying all of those services to our troops, to our air traffic controllers, to our TSA, to 1.5 million American government employees. It's a nonsensical argument.
And we know that the longer a shutdown goes on, obviously those workers have went without pay, and it's not like they can be paid like that. It's not like the issues at the airport are going to be resolved the moment that the government reopens. And some of your colleagues in the House Republicans signed a letter to Speaker Mike Johnson, and I want to read part of it and get your take on it. They said this, that after the shutdown, quote, "We should immediately turn our focus to the growing crisis of healthcare affordability and the looming expiration of the enhanced Affordable Care Act premium tax credits. Millions of Americans are facing drastic premium increases due to short-sighted Democratic policymaking. While we did not create this crisis, we have both the responsibility and the opportunity to address it." Obviously, that's something you agree with because you have said that healthcare costs are an issue. What is the Republican plan then to address healthcare costs in this country?
Well, I agree with part of that statement from a group of centrist Republicans that are concerned about the cost of healthcare overall, but I disagree with them that the solution is some sort of extension to these Affordable Care Act subsidies that were really for the emergency COVID period and for the emergency COVID period only. We understand we've got to come to the conclusion, right, just on its surface, that if we are demanding these emergency subsidies become permanent for the Affordable Care Act to actually be affordable, then it goes without much difficulty in understanding that the Affordable Care Act is actually not affordable. And that's what we have to all recognize. And look, this is something that I think Republicans have failed with in the past, is we've not provided a good or reasonable alternative, but we certainly have never supported the Affordable Care Act because what's in it and the things that underpin it, that prop it up, like these temporary subsidies, seem to always have to become permanent, and become permanent in such a terrible way where we're not giving this money to the American people. We're giving this money to large insurance companies. I think that's what most people who are actually supportive of the Democratic worldview and thought process here don't understand. They don't know that this money is going directly to some of the largest corporations in America. Which is usually anathema to what they actually believe and state that they represent. And so, look, there's no question that healthcare is unaffordable. We have got to take this next year and work together to make healthcare affordable. I think that means a fairly radical departure from the Affordable Care Act. We've got a year to figure this out, or Republicans will be held accountable for it in the 2026 elections. I think there's no question about that.
And I was speaking with Congresswoman Lisa McClain last week, and she said there's no silver bullet fix. This isn't a problem that can be fixed overnight. And I know you don't approve of, and you wouldn't agree and support the extension of the enhanced ACA subsidies, but would you temporarily support them for perhaps a year while everyone in the House hammers this out and maybe provides something more substantial when it comes to fighting healthcare costs in this country? Because it doesn't seem like, as of now, the House is really good at compromising.
No, I won't support them because they don't solve the problem in any way, shape, or form. I mean, this is what we've got to understand, is that even for those who are getting subsidies, the expiration of these emergency subsidies only affects 5% of those people that are getting subsidies. This in no way, shape, or form impacts the 75% of Americans that actually can't afford health care. And so I'm not in the business up here. My constituents do not want me to put Band-Aids on significant bleeding wounds and say that our job here as politicians is done. That's not the type of performative politics that I was elected to perform up here. I was actually elected to actually make demonstrable change and increase positive outcomes for my constituents. And that's what I intend to do. I'm by no means a healthcare expert, but I do know the free market solves a lot of the problems that we have. And when we can increase competition and we can increase consumer choice, that is almost always the right answer, and certainly is the right answer when it comes to healthcare.
I know that people will be seeing these premiums rise. The KFF says by an estimated 26%. ACA insurers are raising premiums by an estimated 26%, but most enrollees would see sharper increases in what they pay if enhanced tax credits expire. So when would this I know you don't want a Band-Aid, so when would the permanent fix be in place? Because people are seeing what their premiums would be next year and are saying, oh my God, I can't afford this. I'm going to have to make some tough choices here when it comes to my health care. I mean, what do you say to those people, and what's the fix for 2026?
Well, you've got to educate them that it's not a binary choice. It's not, if we don't get these enhanced subsidies re-upped for another year, my healthcare is going to go up. No, your healthcare is going to go up. I mean, that's what people, I think, fundamentally don't understand. This is not, these subsidies are not actually a stopgap to prevent healthcare costs from increasing sharply this year. Healthcare costs are increasing sharply because the Affordable Care Act is failing, and it's failing in real time. And so, look, again, just to be as completely clear and honest with you as I possibly can, I don't take the House healthcare system because it's actually too expensive. It doesn't make any sense for me and my family. And we actually use an Affordable Care Act carve out that is called a health sharing ministry to provide for my family's health care because it's a reasonable and actually affordable, and it really does work. I don't buy into the system that we have at all. And it's not just me saying that. That's actually what I do with my family's dollars. So look, I'm not, I don't have like some protective, golden parachute here that no other American has. We're fighting the exact same fight that every other American is fighting and looking for better solutions that are currently on the table. I think my family has found one with a Christian health sharing ministry, but we've got a lot of work to do to make sure that all Americans have access to something like that works for them. Right now, they don't.
But Congressman, isn't that crazy that you're a member of Congress and you're saying my healthcare stinks? I need to go elsewhere because the healthcare at my job really stinks. Do you think that Republicans need to be better at messaging on this? Because I know you said earlier that Republicans will have some trouble next year if this situation isn't fixed. I know Marjorie Taylor Greene, your colleague, said that she wants to prioritize this because this is the number one issue that she hears in her district. I mean, how do you think that Republicans can work on this?
I think Republicans just have to be honest about it, right? Like, I'm trying to be as honest with folks as I possibly can and say, hey, I'm right along there with you. It ain't affordable. It's not working. We spend more money and get some of the worst outcomes in the world per dollar spent in our healthcare system. That means we fundamentally failed. Period. End of story. There's really not any other discussion that we ought to have. And where we're stuck is Republicans have always just said, the Affordable Care Act doesn't work and they don't provide an alternative. And Democrats have always said the Affordable Care Act is the solution to all of our problems. Both parties are clearly wrong. We've got to do a lot better than this if we're being honest with the American people.
And I know that Democrats, obviously, a lot of them, except the 8 that voted to support this, had an issue with the defectors in their party voting to support this funding bill that would end the government shutdown. And they did this based on a deal where there would be a vote in December on extending the Affordable Care Act subsidies. And I know that's something you don't support. Do you think that's going to go anywhere?
I can't speak for the Senate. I wouldn't think so, but I don't think it'll go anywhere in the House. No. And I think the charter for all of us moving forward is Republicans actually having honest conversations with Democrats and Democrats actually having honest conversations with Republicans and working this out over the next year. I don't think it's something that we can actually come to any sort of practical solution before the end of the year. We may come to some sort of a political solution. I would not be supportive of that, right? Again, I'm not into performative politics. I'm into outcomes for people. And so we've got to dig in over this next year. I do think Lisa McClain is right. There's no silver bullet. This is not going to be easy. This is going to be one of the hardest things that we've probably ever done or tried to accomplish in Congress. But we've got to do the work to do it over the next year. Or like I said, I think that we'll pay for it when it comes to the 2026 elections.
And I'm excited. Hopefully we can have those conversations as those conversations with your colleagues continue. But government's been shut down for over 40 days. Looks like it's getting back on track. What's next? When you get back to Congress, what are some of your priorities that you're going to be working on?
Well, look, we're back right now. We've got the rule vote in just a few minutes, and then hopefully we've got final passage later this evening. We'll get the government back open come, probably the end of this weekend, and we'll have, relatively a normal week next week. We've got to get through the appropriations process. There's no question about that. I mean, we extended the continuing resolution date through January 30th so that we can accomplish that. We can get through this next fiscal year. and be on some sort of sound footing. And then look, I think the charter for us is very clear. We've got to continue doing what we promised to do to the American people when we all got elected this time last year. Much of that work is bearing fruit. Good principle is crafting good policy, which is crafting good outcomes from the American people. But we have to hasten those outcomes, particularly when it comes to affordability for Americans. Everything is just too expensive. It is not limited to healthcare. The middle class feels like it's getting left behind, and they feel that way because in many ways they are. And so I'm all about great policy. I think we've been pursuing good policy. I think Americans, particularly our middle class, is going to have an absolutely incredible tax return when it comes to early next year. They're going to see a lot of the fruits of the policies that we've laid through the reconciliation process. And I think that we're going to continue on a path to making America stronger through making our economy stronger. We've just got to make sure that the average American can continue to hang, and not just hang, but actually thrive. And I think in time, before the 2026 elections, you're going to see proof positive the results of some really good policies actually impacting Americans in a very beneficial way.
I do now want to make a total left turn here and talk about some legislation that you introduced that has to do with upping drone production in this country. It's called the Sky Foundry Act. Talk to us about it.
Well, look, we've got a couple problems when it comes to our national defense. And number one, we only make about 50,000 drones a year when our adversaries are going to make north of 25 million drones this year at a far lesser cost, by the way, that costs us to produce those 50,000, which is just nonsensical. We're learning incredible lessons from the battlefield in Ukraine, what Israel is having happen in their own backyard. And we're seeing what's happening down in South America and Mexico with cartels and narco terrorists. And we've got to be very, very intentional about building a domestic production capacity for small drones. And we have to decouple that production, that supply chain from China completely. If we do those two things, we put America on a path to actually having a very, very strong and robust defense when it comes to this new category of drones. And Sky Foundry seeks to do just that by producing the first million drones at a rate of 1 million a year in this country. We're going to do that through a unique set of public-private partnerships, do business in ways that has never actually been done before between the government and the private sector. And I think both sides are really going to benefit from it. The American taxpayer is absolutely going to benefit from it because we're going to be able to drive costs through the floor and drive flexibility through the roof. That's the name of the game in drones, where the technology is changing so quickly. I'm really, really excited about this program, if you can't tell.
I can tell. And I have a few questions about it because I find it fascinating. A, would it be one factory, one plant in this country? Where would that be at? Would there be, a different, how would you pick which city it would be in?
Yeah, there's going to be distributed manufacturing all across the country, right, in its full conception. And so ultimately, look, if you put one massive facility, you've just created only one target for the enemy to try to mess with in the event that we actually got into conflict. So no, we envision that this production will happen all over the place. It'll involve all sorts of different companies. It'll involve the government, certainly. And I think it's going to be a really unique structure of how we can take the concept of the organic industrial base, which has always been a fixture and a pillar of how we produce for wartime, but actually make it much more efficient by infusing the private sector in a way that's never been done before, where you're going to array dozens and dozens and dozens of private sector companies against some government assets in a way, again, that's just never been done. I'm super excited about it. I think we're going to reduce the risk for the private sector. We're going to increase flexibility for both government and the private sector, and we're going to develop a new pathway to pay government contractors, which is actually through intellectual property royalties. And so everybody's really excited about this construct. I think it's going to do great things for the future of American defense, and might possibly just be a model that we could really revolutionize the way that we're operating our organic industrial base across all the different sectors that we have it, not just drones.
And how exactly would that public-private partnership work? What would that really look like?
Well, in Sky Foundry, you've got two different components to it. You effectively have an innovation lab for these small unmanned aerial systems, and then you have production facilities. And the private sector would array around those innovation laboratories, which would really kind of be a fusion cell between the best of the best private sector contractors that are out there, from the smallest guys that are working in their garage that don't have a lot of capital, but have a lot of know-how, and they've got the buy-in of some of our most elite, military operators, all the way up to and including the primes. We are not going to pick, what category of government contractor you have to be. You're just going to have to compete to get a seat at the table. And once you've proven you have a seat at the table, you can provide intellectual property into the system that the government will ultimately produce, and the government will pay you a very substantial royalty for your contributions based off the units of production. That doesn't mean that we're limited to, one or two different designs. What we've got to get away from in our military, we've got to stop procuring end items, and we have to start procuring capabilities. That's probably the singular most important thing that we have to change in our defense acquisition structure, because the technology is just changing so fast today, so much faster than it was 10 years ago. And so if we're buying the same thing 6 months from now that we're buying today, we're failing. We currently don't have an acquisition mechanism that can keep up with the rate the technology is changing. We're trying to fix that by providing a completely different structure to accommodate the modern pace of technological development.
And I believe you said the goal was 1 million drones a year, right?
Yes.
Would we be stockpiling those, or would we be selling those to our allies or other countries?
Well, we could do either of those two things, or we could choose to just maintain the production capability and not produce because we don't need them. That's where the ultimate flexibility comes in for the American taxpayer. And you take the indeterminable demand that the government is famous for, which drives the private sector absolutely crazy. And if you can take the acquisition of those production assets off the private sector, you actually de-risk the private sector in this type of endeavor while creating that level of flexibility for everybody. I think it's the way that we actually create a stable ecosystem across our defense industrial base like we've never seen before.
And I know that you introduced this before the government shutdown, and obviously everything has really ground to a halt since October 1st. But what's next for this legislation?
Well, we got it into both the House and the Senate versions of the National Defense Authorization Act. And so Sky Foundry is going to happen. And we're going through the conference process right now, dialing in exactly what that prescriptive language from Congress is going to look like to make sure that the Department of War stays within the original congressional intent. What's important to me is that we build the entire organic industrial base in Sky Foundry around the private sector. That is the most critical component in all of this, is we cannot isolate the private sector. The private sector is actually becoming the backbone of the organic industrial base. And once that happens, we hit go. We're pulling reconciliation dollars to do this. It's already been funded. And so Sky Foundry is going to be a very, very different thing 1 year from now than it is right now. And I'm incredibly excited to see it take flight.
Well, I hope we can talk about it then. I hope we can have conversations between now and then. Congressman, thank you so much for joining me. You're welcome back anytime.
Hey, thanks for having me, Brittany. Always great to be with you. And y'all have a great day.